Okay, so let's talk about the Matrix trailer. Now, for obvious reasons, we're not doing a trailer reaction. The obvious reason being, Warner Brothers would strike the hell out of that video. So we are going to talk about the trailer. See, I'm really curious about what's going on with the Matrix right now, because I feel like it's kind of like a reboot, right? Like the Matrix itself was rebooted, but it also fits into the way the original Matrix trilogy ended. Now, for those of you guys who don't know how the Matrix started, and I don't know anybody who doesn't know, but for those of you guys who don't know, the beginnings of the Matrix and how it all came to existence is really cool. It's teased a little bit in the first movie when Morpheus is talking to Neo, but the full-on explanation of how it all came about is actually covered in the Animatrix in a two-part series called The Second Renaissance. And so the way this played out is at the beginning of the 21st century, humanity developed what we really call true artificial intelligence, which is to say, a thinking, feeling singularity among computers. Now, what this did is it led to machines basically developing more machines. But because humans were essentially the ones behind the button, right, able to shut it down or whatever the case was, machines were, by all standards of measurement, subservient to humanity. This basically led to humanity becoming complacent, lazy, and ultimately arrogant. And so what ended up happening is that one of these machines, named B166ER, was actually going to be eliminated, destroyed, put down, what have you, by its owner due to the fact that it was quote unquote malfunctioning. This led to Bigger, as some people call it, killing its master and the mechanic that was supposed to destroy it. And then ultimately B166ER was put on trial and then essentially ordered to be destroyed by the courts, who decreed that machines do not really have souls. They don't have the same rights as humans. This led to what was in effect a worldwide rebellion of machines. Not insofar as they were destroying humanity, but they were going on strike, they were refusing to work, and because most everything involving the human economy in terms of building cities, any real kind of grunt laborious work rested on the shoulders of machines, this basically led to pandemonium among the economy. The result of this is that humanity actually started turning against machines, destroying them, attacking them, different things along those lines. And so in an effort to find some method of survival, the machines retreated to what was in effect the heart of Africa and formed their own country called 01. Following that, they actually started developing goods and services, things along those lines, that basically crushed any real economic achievements by humanity at that point in time. Machines were able to design and build things in a far more efficient and a much faster way than humanity could. Flying cars, things along those lines. And so where you would have car dealerships or car builders, manufacturers, things like that were owned by humanity, they were inefficient in comparison to machines. So consumers started buying things from machines. This turned the entirety of the human economic structure upside down. And so the result of this is that humanity waged war on machines. Now, when the war broke out, it was kind of nuts, right? Machines at that point in time were still relatively primitive, and humanity was still pretty advanced in terms of its weaponry. And so at the beginning of the war, humanity seemed to basically be winning. But the longer the machines fought for, the more they adapted and the more advanced they became, to where what was in effect this initial kind of collapse of the machine empire exploded outward. They started like expanding in every direction, conquering city after city after city. And humans started like falling into the most desperate plans they possibly could. One of these was Operation Dark Storm. Now, Operation Dark Storm was a plan that was thought up by humanity under the belief that machines needed solar energy in order to exist. And so what they did is they darkened the sky. They literally just emitted a ton of little nanomachines that would blanket out the sun. The funny thing about this is that the technology as it was used by humans was actually destroyed by the machines before they could find a way to reverse engineer it. So that's why even when the machines conquer the world, by the time the Matrix film starts off, they couldn't undo the sky because they basically didn't know how. The result of this is that with the machines requiring solar energy but not having it, they started turning to humanity. And so what they would do in the midst of this war, in addition to just like straight out assaulting humanity, right, with just conventional weapons, things like that, spreading around viruses that would basically cripple humanity's armed forces, they actually started kidnapping members of humanity and experimenting on them and seeing if there was a way to use them as a source of energy. And so in addition to all these different experiments, the fact that the machine empire had destroyed the last real vestige of humanity based in New York when they detonated their atomic bomb, that in turn, they started using humanity as an actual energy source. And that's why when you pick up with the beginning of the Matrix movie, when the whole thing is explained to Neo by Morpheus that humans are grown, that's how it happened, because the machines realized they could use humans as an energy source. Now, as I understand it, in terms of real world science, that's not possible. questionable, but within the confines of the movie, it worked. And so what you end up learning over the course of really all three movies is that there is the concept of the one, right? The person that Keanu Reeves played in the original series, which is kind of the person that's going to save humanity from the machines themselves. It was all more or less a ruse. And when you saw that scene with the architect where he's explaining to Neo everything that's going on, the way this basically worked is this has happened multiple times before, but with the exception of Neo, every single person who was the one and was presented with the opportunity to save their love interest or save humanity would choose to be reinserted in the Matrix and save humanity and let their love interest die. Neo chose not to do that. Neo chose to save Trinity, and that's what basically turned everything on its head. Now, the secondary plot to all that by the time he got to the end was that Agent Smith had basically been broken free of its programming and essentially became a virus in the Matrix, right? So when Neo went out into the real world and met with the machines, he had to be reinserted into the Matrix so he could basically work as what was in effect an antivirus to destroy Agent Smith. The biggest issue that you have here when it comes to this movie is we don't know what's going on. We don't know if it's one of these things where it's all just kind of a soft reboot, because by all standards of measurement, at the end of the original Matrix trilogy, Neo died, right? He was gone, like he was out of the picture. Like literally, he's just dead laying there and his body's being carried away by the machines in real life to be given some measure of a proper funeral because I guess the machine hive mind had respect for him now. I don't know. But regardless of the situation, Neo is basically dead. He's essentially returned here. So there's a couple possibilities on what's going on. The first is that Neo is returning as the one because a new Matrix has been created. Either that or somehow the Matrix continued on and Neo's essence, his consciousness, is as much a part of the Matrix as it is a real tangible physical body. And the nature of resurrections is basically Neo resurrecting himself, the concept of reincarnation. Now, one of the things that kind of gives credence to this is there's a scene where Neo is looking in a mirror and he sees a face that's different than his own. And that's why it could very well be that for us as the viewer, we see Keanu Reeves, but he doesn't actually look that way. It's just Neo reborn in somebody else's body, the concept of the one basically returning. Now, in the Matrix mythos, which as far as I'm aware is not really in continuity, there was a second war that broke out between humanity and the machines. Following Neo's sacrifice, that a kind of truce was struck, that the machines would stop hunting humanity and humanity would stay put in Zion, which was the last human city in the real world. Eventually humans tried to establish a second city and a war broke out again. The truce was basically broken, the machines were pissed and they were like, it's all like Donkey Kong, son. So they immediately started attacking humanity, and then as far as I'm aware, I think humanity was destroyed. Like I said, I don't believe that's in continuity anymore. And so the important thing is that this could kind of tie into that concept where the idea of the one is always brought back, always reincarnated, but for whatever reason, a second war has broken out between the machines and humanity, and now that Neo has returned, they need Neo, right? And the reason why I say this is one of the big things to understand about the portrayal of Neo in the Matrix series. He was very much a kind of messianic character, right? Something akin to Jesus, death and rebirth, things along those lines. The idea that he was kind of a messiah that was going to lead humanity into a better life, right? A better existence, somewhere along those lines, and sacrificed his life in the process to the point that when he was being carried away, he was kind of in a cross-like position, right? Where Jesus was essentially put on the cross, that in a lot of ways, Neo kind of looked that way, albeit he was laying down in the process. The themes of death and rebirth, resurrection, religious tones are very, very prominent in the original Matrix series. The notion of this being called resurrections lends credence to the idea that Neo has basically been resurrected within the Matrix itself. But again, we have nothing to go on here. I will say this, one thing that pisses me off, one thing that absolutely pisses me off, apparently Lawrence Fishburne was never even asked to come back, right? It was never even a consideration. They were never like, hey man, do you want to come back and play Morpheus again? Because you know, you're like one of the most iconic characters in the original series. Like, I don't even think he was offered that, right? They just immediately skipped forward and chose the next guy, which kind of disappoints me because I would like to have known what happened with Morpheus in the aftermath of all that, right? What happened with Morpheus's character? How did everything progress with him? You know, we never really got an answer to that question. And so it would have been cool to see how that turned out. Having said that, I'm excited, man, because looking at like everything involving the cast, right? The Wachowskis are behind it, basically. Lana Wachowski is the one who's directing it. Looking at all this stuff, The crew's back, man. The boys are back in town. But a few things that caught my eye here. One, Neo's taking the blue pills, right? So either this is a soft reboot where Neo chose to take the blue pill instead of the red pill and ended up basically waking up in his bed like he was told he would do at the hands of Morpheus, and then everything just kind of continues on. Neil Patrick Harris, if I'm being honest, I think he might be an agent or an architect, the person feeding Neo pills to keep him under control. Now, if that's the case, then it would make perfect sense that Neo is the Neo that we remember, right? The guy who has the ability to control every facet of the Matrix, a living god inside this software. And that if they keep him under control, so one, he doesn't remember anything about his past, and two, he doesn't know what he's capable of, it allows the machines to maintain their control. That's something that very well could have happened. That in the aftermath of the Matrix 3, that the machines were like, thanks for your sacrifice, Neo, I really appreciate you helping us get rid of Agent Smith, but like, we still need to basically grow you guys and take over your energy. So, the entirety of Zion's destroyed, everybody gets put back in the Matrix, we go back to the way things were, right? And that's basically how it is. Neo kind of comes back as a means to fix that, but he's being kept under control by Neil Patrick Harris or whatever it is. Because we kind of have to contend with this idea that if Neo didn't know anything about the versions of the one that came before him, it may very well be that if he's reborn or resurrected, he wouldn't know anything about his own past life. And so if that's the case, the best way to keep him under control is to feed him blue pills so he's totally unaware of what's going on with any of the truth about the Matrix, and he's fed those pills by Neil Patrick Harris, who's working on behalf of the machines themselves, either as a piece of software in the form of like an agent, or something more important in the form of the architect, the one who designed the Matrix. You've also got Trinity there, but Trinity doesn't know Neo, right? She literally says that. They touch hands and she's like, do I know you? Right, so obviously the physical interaction seems to kind of jog something, but Trinity seems to be going about her normal life as if she was never part of Morpheus's crew in the first place. Has Trinity been reinserted into the Matrix, her mind wiped, and she just goes forward as just an average person with no knowledge of the fact that she's living in a software simulation. Regardless of how you slice it, this movie looks cool, and the trailer left me with a lot of questions, all kinds of questions, which I'm really happy about because I feel like in more recent years, trailers have kind of been like, hey guys, here's a new movie coming out with this person. Do you want to know what happens to him? We'll find out right now in the trailer, right? And I feel like it ruins the whole thing, right? As opposed to sitting down, watching the trailer and walking away, knowing virtually nothing about the movie except for the fact that it looks cool. I miss those days. And I'm glad to see the cut of this trailer really seemed to answer a lot of that stuff, right? We have some little bits and pieces here and there and questions about whether or not Neo will actually go back to the Neo that we knew as opposed to the version that he is now, but it looks cool, right? So let me know down in the comment section what you guys think about the Matrix Resurrections trailer. Are you excited about it? Or are you kind of like, I'm really more hyped for Spider-Man. Let me know what you guys think. And I will catch you all later. Peace.